In the roots of blues guitar, there are some players that seem to channel something very soulful and almost spiritual through their music. They can express themselves in a way with such raw intensity and emotion that it paints a vivid sonic picture for the listener. Robert Johnson took us to the crossroads and played for us some very haunting Delta slide guitar. His dark lyrics and soulful moans will make you believe that he really did sell his soul to the devil. Jimi Hendrix took the blues to new levels with his psychedelic feedback and blazing fast blues runs. He was also a pioneer in the studio, creating effects that had never been done before, like playing two of the same tracks at once and slowing one of them down, ever so slightly, to create an airy, whooshing effect, which is today called a flanger. In the 1980s, a young blues guitar player from Texas named Stevie Ray Vaughan was blazing a trail of his own. He made his Fender Stratocaster wail through vintage amplifiers. With fast clean blues runs and percussive rhythm patterns, he was known to have to occasionally use superglue to reattach the calluses on his fingertips after they would come off from his hard style of playing on extra heavy gauged guitar strings. As popularity soared with his band Double Trouble, he helped bring blues music back into the mainstream. But after only a brief time in the spotlight, Stevie's life would be cut short when he was killed in a helicopter crash. It was right after a concert he played with Buddy Guy, Eric Clapton, Robert Cray, and his brother, Jimmy Vaughan. Shortly before he was killed, Stevie told his bandmates and crew of a dream he had the night before, where he was at his own funeral, and saw thousands of mourners there. He said it was terrifying, but he felt oddly at peace. The concert that night was at the Alpine Valley Music Theater in East Troy, Wisconsin. For the closer of the night, Clapton, Buddy Guy, Robert Cray, Jimmy Vaughan and Stevie all took the stage at once and completely rocked the house with Sweet Home Chicago. Stevie played his heart out and stole the show. After the concert, 4 helicopters were waiting on the golf course behind the stage to transport some of the musicians and crew to Chicago to play at Buddy Guy's Blues Club. A Bell 206B Jet Ranger, piloted by Jeff Brown, had been reserved to fly Stevie, his brother Jimmy, and Jimmy's wife Connie. When they walked up to the helicopter, they found that 3 of the seats had been taken by members of Clapton's crew. Bodyguard Nigel Brown, Agent Bobby Brooks and Assistant Tour Manager Colin Smythe. Stevie asked Jimmy if he could have the one seat that was left, and Jimmy obliged, as he didn't want to be separated from his wife. Having their seats taken by Clapton's people was a simple twist of fate that would ultimately save the lives of Jimmy and Connie Vaughan. Let's take a flight over Alpine Valley in daylight so we can see what happened at 1 a.m. on that foggy early morning of August 27, 1990. We are now flying over the golf course that the helicopters took off from. On the left is the Alpine Valley Outdoor Music Theater, and straight ahead is the Alpine Valley Ski Resort. Here to our right is the 300-foot-tall man-made ski slope that they crashed into. The slope protrudes above the surrounding terrain and was shrouded in thick fog that night. Heading back towards the music theater, we see the resort below where many of the fans stayed that night. The helicopter did not catch fire when it crashed, so no one even realized it had crashed just a little over half a mile from where it took off from. It wasn't discovered until daylight that morning. The Alpine Valley Music Theater had hosted many legendary performers since it opened in 1977, but some might argue that Stevie Ray Vaughan was the best. He played the blues the way it should be played, pouring it out with raw emotion and soul from his heart. They took off at 1 a.m. heading southeast. As pilot Jeff Brown lifted the helicopter above the bright lights of the golf course, the slope ahead was shrouded in darkness and fog. With his eyes not yet adjusted, and the city lights hidden behind the hills in front of them, he was momentarily flying blind over unfamiliar terrain. He banked downward and to the left and impacted the slope 50 feet from the summit. We are now flying over the spot where the helicopter crashed. The wreckage and bodies were spread out over 200 feet on this service road. Now let's reenact the flight in the dark. First, we'll add some fog and change the time to 1 a.m. Hovering in this is very difficult without a clear visual point of reference. Brown was not as familiar with flying this area as the other pilots were that night, nor was he instrument rated in a helicopter, as the other pilots were. All on board died instantly on impact. Early in his career, Stevie abused drugs and alcohol. He had gotten clean in the years preceding his death and would speak to his fans during his performances about the beauty of not using drugs. His message of positivity was, and still is, a beacon of hope for people struggling with addiction. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you can see more like it.